It's going through.
Oh, you see it? Good. Mine was still loading. Okay, we're live. One of my favorite things to say these days. Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to be welcoming you to day 5, which is actually our final day at Health Equity Week of Action for this year. This has been a beautiful few days together, and it's just going to keep getting better and better. This day, this morning, this evening, we will be thinking over the theme of From Reflection to Reconstruction, Strengthening Our Collective Voice. This can mean a lot of things, and it actually reminds me of the pillars that we've chosen to enact as we think through the broader vision of our advocacy and action here at AMSA. One thing that it means for me is as we prepare to advocate and to act, education about that very thing, about that issue is so important. It's vital. To make the changes that we want to make, to do the sign-on letters, to fight the good fight, we have to prioritize that we are knowledgeable about the things that matter and about how we can best serve our patients and our communities. So what reflection to reconstruction can really mean for us today is taking in and sitting with all that we are learning and all that we have learned, allowing ourselves to reconfigure and reimagine how we can show up within the body of medicine that we choose, and how we can take these important educational initiatives, all that we have learned, and we can transform it into tangible action. It's not just an individualistic approach, it's a collective approach. We are stronger together. We are here to learn how to be together. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day. I am so excited to bring the National Marrow Donor Program. This is an incredible example of equity. They work tirelessly to ensure that marrow is available for those who need it most. They are far-reaching. They engage students and communities alike to ensure that patients all over the world can get the care that they need. Not only will we learn about what the program does on the ground, but we will learn how we can take actionable steps as students, and again, finding where our voice as future physicians can be in the fight for donor equity. So, thank you so much for being with us, Ms. Garrington. Take it away.
Thank you, Danya. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to share my screen. If it's, I'm trying. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
It's coming. Yep, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. Then I will jump right in. Thank you all for giving me some of your time today. I'm excited to share NMDP with you. I always like to start presentations sharing one of our searching patients. This is Max. He is someone that has come on board recently. You may have seen him. His dad has started a huge campaign for Max. Max is in need of a stem cell transplant. He has a condition that requires him to have a stem cell transplant within the next couple of months, or his condition will turn into AML. So his dad has started a huge campaign to find a match for Max. His dad is Colombian, which makes it a little bit more difficult for Max to find a match. You're most likely to match someone who shares your same ethnic background. So there's been a real focus on finding a specific match for Max, and there are no matches yet. So he's just one of many searching patients that we can potentially help by supporting NMDP. And I'll talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. So at NMDP, we believe that each of us hold the key to curing blood cancers and disorders. We manage the National Stem Cell Registry, which is a registry of over 40 million people willing to donate their stem cells to patients with blood cancers and blood diseases. So leukemia, lymphoma, sickle cell. A lot of people don't realize there's a cure for those conditions and those cancers. It's a stem cell transplant. Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to find a match as it's based on your ethnicity and not your blood type. Only 25% of patients will find a match within their family. 75% of patients turn to our registry to find that life-saving, unrelated donor match. Ideal donors are 18 to 25 years old, which is why we partner with colleges and universities and why we have national partnerships with groups like AMSA to help us promote on college campuses and get those young, healthy, college-age donors educated on NMDP and to become part of the registry. Some numbers that we're proud of. In 2025, we impacted almost 9,000 lives. And we added more than 230,000 donors to the registry, which is fantastic. So a little bit about our partnership with AMSA. Between 1999 and 2025, we've partnered with the American Medical Student Association. Y'all, thank you so much, to host over 50 recruitment events and provide unique volunteering opportunities. Through our partnership, you have added over 1,800 donors to the registry. And of those 1,800 donors, 13 of them have come up as matches and gone on to donate to patients in need, which is incredible. So great work. We love our partnership and I'm excited to watch it grow. So the need for donors, as I mentioned earlier, has a genetic component. The best match for a patient is likely going to be someone who shares their same ethnic background. And because of the makeup of our registry, not all patients have the same chance of finding a match. 75% of patients, as I mentioned earlier, don't have a fully matched donor in their family, and they turn to our registry for help. Only 40% of the potential donors on our registry are ethnically diverse. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So how matching works. As I mentioned, it has nothing to do with blood type. What really matters is your HLA, your human leukocyte antigens. And those are basically proteins or markers that are found on most cells in your body. And that's what's used to match patients and donors for blood stem cell transplant. These are inherited from your biological parents. It's very complex, which is what makes it so difficult for patients to find a match. So what we're actually looking at is your HLA, your human leukocyte antigens, and those markers. So going back to ethnicity and representation on the registry, breaking down that 40% that I mentioned earlier, only 13% of the potential donors on our registry identify as Hispanic. Only 7% identify as Black or African American. And only 9% of the registry identify as AAN-HPI. So looking at those numbers, you can see that disparity and that lack of representation on the registry. So not only are we trying to build the registry at NMDP, but we're trying to diversify the registry and ensure that all patients have the equal outcome of finding their perfect match. So you can join the registry if you're between the ages of 18 and 35. And I know you heard me mention earlier, 18 to 25-year-olds are those ideal donors. That tends to be the age range that doctors are choosing because those cells have just proven to be more robust and make for better transplant outcomes. So really a focus on that 18 to 25, but you can join up until the age of 35 and you stay on the registry until your 61st birthday. You have to be a resident of the United States or one of its territories or freely associated states, and you have to be able to meet our medical guidelines. I always like to mention at this point that just because you're not eligible to donate blood doesn't mean you're not eligible to join our registry. Our guidelines are far different. So if you're thinking about joining or if you're hosting an event on your campus and someone says, oh, you don't want me, I can't donate blood, let them know that that's likely not the case and that they should go ahead and give it a try because chances are they are very likely eligible to join the registry. So why donors' age matters, I just touched on this a little bit, but research has shown that cells from younger donors lead to better long-term survival rates for patients after transplant. They're really in place to protect the health of our potential donors and to provide, obviously, the best treatment plan for patients. If someone's unable to join the registry, there are other ways they can save a life. They can advocate, they can volunteer, they can donate financially, but a lot of people, especially when you're on campuses, you may have professors that come by that may fall out of that age range. And we like to say they're overqualified, but they can help in other ways. So there's two ways to donate blood stem cells. This is a question. This is probably the number one question we get when hosting events on campuses, and I love to talk about it because people hear stem cell or marrow donation and they imagine these horrible procedures. Technology, as you all know, has come a really long way. So I love to talk about the two easy ways to donate. The most common, 90% of the time, doctors are requesting peripheral blood stem cell donation. PBSC is what we refer to that as. And this is the process called apheresis. So just like donating platelets or plasma, 90% of the time, this is what our donors are doing. So most of our donors are doing this process. It takes about 4 to 5 hours for the whole procedure. It's just like if you've ever donated blood and you've seen someone at the blood drive giving power reds or double reds, I think they call them, it's that same process. So that's the most common. About 10% of the time, a doctor may request bone marrow. This is not a horrible procedure. This is where you might see people cringe. This is about a 30 to 45-minute procedure done in a medical facility. You're under anesthesia, so you don't feel a thing. They do use a needle to draw the marrow from your lower back. They literally put a bandage on it. There's no stitching, no scarring. You go home the same day, and you're usually back to your normal routine within just a few days. But those are the two ways to donate, and we really encourage when you're talking to people about NMDP to talk about these two ways to donate because it is one of the most commonly asked questions and one of the things that people are most hesitant about when joining the registry. The next most common question we get is it going to cost me anything to donate? The short answer is no. It'll never cost the donor anything to donate. And this goes back to the fact that if you are lucky enough to come up as a match for a searching patient, you're likely the only hope for that patient. It's not like we're finding multiple matches for patients. We're lucky to even find one. So if you are one of the lucky ones that gets called to donate, you're likely the only hope. So at NMDP, it's our responsibility, our mission to ensure that we can get your cells to that patient. So NMDP will pay for all donation-related expenses, medical, of course. If you have to travel to donate, we're going to pay for your travel for you and one companion. I like to call it a little donation vacation for you and a friend. We'll pay for personal expenses. If you need daycare, pet care, all of that will be covered. And then if you miss work, we'll pay lost wages up to $50 an hour to ensure that you're not, missing out on any wages. So if you are a match, you'll be asked to provide blood samples for further testing. Typically, that's done locally. Travel will likely be required for donation, depending on the location of your patient and the location of transplant centers. And on average, the process for donation takes about 20 to 30 hours spread over 4 to 6 weeks. And if needed, NMDP is always available to answer any questions that your family, professors, coaches, or employers might have. So no, it'll never cost a donor anything to donate. And again, you could be a patient's only match, their only hope for a cure. So we always encourage people when they're registering to make sure that they're committed to donating to any patient in the world, even if they're joining on behalf of a specific patient like Max, who I mentioned earlier. Because again, when you join the registry with that simple cheek swab, what that does is it puts you on that database with the other 40 million people willing to donate their stem cells. So as doctors are searching, if you come up as a match, they would let you know who you matched and they would ask you to go on to donate to that specific patient. And a decision not to donate truly can be life-threatening to a patient. So we want to make sure that everyone is thinking seriously before joining the registry. So safeguarding your privacy, another question we get is, what are you going to do with my information? How will you protect it? When you join the registry, your sample and information about your tissue type are identified by a unique number, and that's kept separate from any of your personal information. We'll only use your personal information for things like matching you with a patient, sending you membership information, or sharing other ways that you can support NMDP. We will never share your information with outside agencies. We'll never share your contact information or genetic type with any government agencies, any companies beyond our clinical partners in an effort to find, to search for a match. So your information is definitely protected and you don't have to worry about that. Health equity. Dr. Kamara Jones said, health equity is the assurance of the conditions for optimal health for all people. Achieving health equity requires valuing all individuals and populations equally, recognizing and rectifying historical injustices, and providing resources according to need. This is very true here at NMDP. We, as I mentioned, we have lack of representation on our registry, and outcomes are not equal for all of our patients. So this is a huge focus of ours to build and diversify the registry I mentioned earlier. Ethnically diverse patients are 11% less likely to get to transplant. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in this next slide. So there is a patient drop-off at each stage to transplant. So on the left, you can see the stages to transplant. So at diagnosis, you can see the number we're starting with broken down by white and ethnically diverse patients. That you can see there's a significant difference as you look down this graph. And for that preliminary search, you can see that initial drop-off from the 96,000 to 11,000. And then the other one, I don't have to read the numbers to you. So that preliminary search is that first search that we do to find those potential matches. And then we go on to the formal search when we decide, okay, is this the perfect match? Once we get to that search, we go to the workup order. We found your match. We're going to reach out to that donor, and then we go to collection and shipment. And you can see that only 31% of our patients make it to that last step here with our ethnically diverse, and 42% for our white patients. And the reason for some of that loss, it could be that a donor is no longer available for whatever the reason is. It could be health. It could be that they changed their mind. So that goes back to that commitment. When you're joining the registry, we want to make sure that when we call you, you say yes, because you could be and are likely the only hope for that patient. So this is just kind of at a glance for you to see the disparity on the path to transplant. So NMDP is expanding access for all patients. We're always trying to expand access for all of our patients. And some of the things we're doing early and proactive outreach is really important. Connecting with those patients early. Financial assistance, that's something that NMDP supports as well. We're not only transplant and finding matches, we're helping patients from start to finish through the process. Education is something that we focus on, and I think that is also referenced at that early and proactive outreach. We want to make sure that all of our patients are educated. They know the assistance that's out there, the assistance that we can offer. We have clinical trials for search and support. We have a Peer Connect program where we can connect patients with other patients, both before transplant, during transplant, and post-transplant for families as well. We offer counseling and navigation, post-transplant communication. Our patients don't just go to transplant and they're not done with us then. We stay in communication. We make sure that all is well for them. And then we also offer survivorship support. So a lot of things that we're trying to expand on and offer to our patients to ensure that they have everything that they need. So ethnically diverse patients face multiple obstacles to treatment. Insurance is the big one, and specifically with Hispanic patients, 36.8% of Hispanic patients have public insurance. 17% have no insurance at all. So they're more likely than any other racial or ethnic group to be uninsured. Referrals. Physicians' implicit bias may also impact referral to consult, and shortages of Spanish-speaking providers has been documented throughout the U.S., which also has a direct, creates an obstacle, obviously. Access. A lack of cancer and transplant centers on or near the U.S.-Mexico border adds logistical and travel barriers for patients who already face numerous sociodemographic challenges. And systemic barriers. Ethnically diverse patients are more likely to face structural, financial, and cultural barriers to care, which can also just erode their trust in the medical system overall. So health inequities have complex causes, as you know, and no one can solve them all on their own. But together, I really believe that we can help make transplant accessible to all patients who need it. And that is our goal here at NMDP. So expanding access also for potential donors is something that we focus on. We're trying to make that process easy. We talked about, all of the things, all of those most commonly asked questions for donors, and we want to make it simple. So we're trying to expand telehealth options for physical exams to limit that travel. Missed wage reimbursement, we want to make sure that we're reimbursing as much as is needed for those donors that might miss work. As I mentioned, we're covering childcare and pet care assistance, trying to take care of all of those barriers that might get in the way. We also have a Peer Connect program for our donors so that donors can connect with other donors during the donation process and after the donation process as well. We offer social work support. And we're looking to tailor travel arrangements for donation as well to make travel as seamless as possible for our donors. Also offering recovery and post-donation support to follow up with our donors and make sure they're doing well post-donation. And then we also have a growing network of apheresis and collection centers in an effort also to provide more opportunities within those areas that may not have those donor centers or those transplant centers local to them. So very donor and patient focused at NMDP, trying to put them all at the forefront. So join the movement to expand access and save lives. AMSA has been a huge help, and we could use your help more now than ever. NMDP is unlocking new treatments with unprecedented life-saving potential all the time. Now is a great time for AMSA to continue to help. And if you want to get your chapter involved, please do reach out. This QR code is just a short Google form. I promise it's going to take you about 60 seconds to fill out, but it's just an interest form. If you're interested in getting your chapter involved, go ahead and fill it out. I can connect you with your local NMDP team to host an event on your campus. If you just have more questions or want to schedule another call to talk more about who we are and what we do, we can schedule that as well through this form. Once you are connected with your local rep, you can select a date and a location for the event you want to host, and then promote the event and come out to volunteers. So lots of ways that you can support, but please do scan that QR code if you're interested. And that wraps up my slide deck. I'm going to go to the next slide, and this is the last slide. This is Terry's information. Terry is the national AMSA contact who couldn't be with us today, but this is her information, and she wants to make sure that everybody has that should you need anything.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. We already have a question in the chat so Christian asked, how can I get on the registry? I'm wondering, can we use that form that we just shared a moment ago, or what would the best and quickest process be?
So I would have to share that we don't have the QR code to join right now. My recommendation would be to host an event on your campus and join with the rest of your peers on campus. You can also join online. That is an option that I can share, Danya, with you after. I can share a code for you to put out there. But there is every AMSA chapter is given their own unique code. So when people join the registry through their efforts, we can track that back to your campus. So in those numbers I shared earlier with those 13 donors, we can look back and show you what campuses they came from, which is pretty cool. And it would be your unique code that you would scan to join the registry.
Thank you so much. That would be wonderful. Christian and others who might be interested in joining the registry, once I receive that information, I will post it under the resources that you'll find on the HEWA page. So every night, once or a day, when we get new resources that are shared live during the session, I update the page. So make sure to check that out, and we can also connect with you individually as well. Are there other questions at this time, or reflections? Anything of the sort?
I have a question.
Please.
Why do you think there are such a small percentage of donors or match donors who are not ethnically diverse? What do you think is like a reason for that?
It's lack of representation on the registry. That's in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's lack of representation on the registry, and then some other things, that we talked a little bit about. Trust with the medical system. I think there's some hesitancy there in certain ethnic groups. And so the education we talked about coming onto campuses, leaning on groups like AMSA to talk about NMDP to help gain that trust, that peer-to-peer communication that you can have. I think it helps with the trust. And I think organically, once we get that, we'll see more representation from different ethnicities on the registry.
Thank you so much.
It's a great question, Isabel, and thank you for your answer, Ms. Garrington. I think this is an example of lack of equity and health disparities, right? So like a reflection of how we can, I think a specific angle that AMSA can also take is ensuring that ethnically diverse groups feel that representation, because oftentimes, again, they will be relying on that match, to save their lives. And so what can we do to increase that therapeutic alliance and that trust, to enhance the registry? Christian, I'm so glad they shared that this is a beautiful program and wishes it was more widespread and would 100% be interested in hosting an event on campus, which is so great to hear. I have a brief question, and if others have any questions, please feel free to unmute after me or place it in the chat. I'm wondering about the potential relationship between the donor and the recipient. Is it common, or how does that relationship typically go? Meaning, if a donor was interested in meeting, the recipient, and or vice versa, is that commonly seen, or is it commonly kept private, or how does that typically go?
So that's a great question. It is confidential until 1 year post-transplant. And if both the donor and the patient want to meet, then NMDP helps to coordinate that donor-patient meeting. You are able to write letters to your recipient and or your donor. Within that 1 year, there just can't be any identifying information in the letters. So there is that line of communication that's there. And then 1 year post-transplant, yes, you can. And if anyone has free time, I know you're med students, you probably don't have much, but if you Google NMDP donor-patient meeting, grab a tissue. It's pretty incredible to see.
Oh, I can only imagine. And I would assume that a lot of that, like you said, is for confidentiality purposes. Are there other reasons in your experience that they've just wanted to keep it private for that long?
It's just for the safety of the donor. They want to ensure that transplant has gone well. And once you hit that 1 year mark, it's a good indication that they are well on their way, on the road to recovery.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for your answer. Any other questions? I will actually find that video, or a video of that, and share it in the chat. You said it was donor recipient meeting.
Yes, and there's multiple out there, so you can pick and choose, but it's pretty neat to see when donors and patients get to meet.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, I will share that in the chat. Any other questions or reflections? Okay.
Danya, actually, I have a question for you based on the work that you had done last year as the Civic Science Fellow. Just in relation to the clinical algorithms that incorrectly include race correction factors, what did you see, or did you see anything in relation to the impact of those clinical algorithms in relation to eligibility for transplant donor lists, prioritization on donor lists that were negatively impacted by those algorithms? And I don't know if the marrow donor, if marrow donation depends in any way on algorithms that currently have race correction factors in them. I'm asking from a place of ignorance on that. I'm not aware, but it prompted that thought in my head in relation to what I've seen you include in the research that you had done around the clinical algorithms and the impact on donor prioritization or recipient prioritization.
That's a fantastic question.
And Ms. Garrington, if you have any insight into that too, please. I just happen to know that Donya was working on this last year, so I wanted to raise that as a question.
So I will answer first, and then I'm wondering if you have anything to share too. That's a fantastic question, Jeff, and my brain was also wondering the same as we were saying your name so formally. Just felt very odd to me. But I was also wondering the same as we were going through the presentation. And truthfully, I did not encounter, I feel like there were in the field of hematology, there were concerns, but the large amount of algorithmic concerns were more so related to the ones that I know you and I discussed. So we see obstetrics and gynecology, we see, the glomerular filtration rate, we see it in pulmonology. So my answer to you is I'm unsure and equally ignorant. However, what does feel like it could, what could be underneath the surface there as well, is that there might be other things. So I'm not sure the process in which a patient has to go through to be a donor outside of the actual, what that interview looks like, what that structured encounter looks like to get medical clearance, like Ms. Garrington was mentioning. So in that clearance, it could be that there are certain questions that might silo patients based upon presumptions that are racially based, right? That are based in those lies. So it makes me wonder, and it's something for us to look into. I'm wondering, Ms. Garrington, do you have any initial feedback for that?
I don't. When he was asking the question, I don't. And I was anxious to hear your answer on that. I love the question, and I'd like to research it more, but I don't.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. It's a good, the curiosity that we can all have is important. So maybe we can all stay on for a moment and talk about it and learn together.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for adjusting that, because and I think you're probably onto something, Donya, that even if there isn't anything explicit, there still are probably points along the evaluative way in assessing patients' functionalities in other aspects of their overall health that I wonder if sort of push up or push down on where they are on the priority lists, and whether any of that relates to these algorithms that incorporate race in inappropriate ways.
No, absolutely. Because when we think about, again, when I'm thinking just hematology in general, when we think about blood and we think about, for example, sickle cell, right, anemia, or G6PD, or like a thalassemia. So like a thalassemia deficiency would be more common in someone of, well, depending on which one, but either Middle Eastern origin or Asian American, or then we think about sickle cell, more so African American or Black. So if we look at those things, it might be that that assumptions are made based upon, something to do with hemoglobin, or something to do with a predisposition towards certain blood disorders, or an assumption there, or a history there that wasn't fully even researched, right? But was more so saying you might be a risk, and therefore wide assumptions that can be damaging for people who would like to be donors and for recipients. So it's a huge question, and I feel like it's almost impossible for systemic racism within the body of medicine to not have infiltrated into this. So more so for us to figure out how we can both combat that and respond to that by education, and hopefully expanding that donor registry. Things to ponder.
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? And maybe someone knows also in our group today, but any other reflections or questions? Okay, my friends. Well, let's do a big round of applause and send some gratitude towards Ms. Garrington's way. Thank you so much for being with us and representing NMDP, and for the work that you do to ensure that these life-saving mechanisms are possible for people. This is a huge example of equity, and once we receive more of that information, we'll be happy to share that widely with our students. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. We appreciate your time. Yes. My friends, so as we take a pause and again, taking in this information, before we leave for the afternoon, I'd like to take a moment to look into that question together if you're interested. And there's no pressure. You're welcome to go and do whatever it is that you might need to do prior to this evening. But for one, I would like to share a video that you can watch of a meeting that I have found here. And this is their YouTube as well. You can access it through that video. And then I'll place one article in the chat for us to maybe think through and read just for, yeah, anemia is here. So this might have something we can sit on and think about together. I really appreciate your question, Jeff, because as we listen to presentations, as we take in knowledge of any form, something we talked about a lot last year during the Civic Science Fellowship was how to critically examine the research that you're reading and how to critically examine the tools that we use in the clinical setting, because we never know where those originated from, which we typically do know, and it's largely based in racist ideologies that we still oftentimes are implementing today. So if you're familiar, the EGFR was recently redacted in 2021, which is an algorithm to assess kidney function. There's been a few others that have been working on getting redacted as well. But keep asking ourselves those questions as we learn together. What important elements do we often miss when we're not taught to critically look at what we're being taught? That's so important. And I thank you, Jeff, for bringing it forward. So friends, yeah, Jeff, no, please.
No, it just, it's not directly related to this, but you can't help but make at least a conceptual connection between the experience of Henrietta Lacks and her cells being effectively stolen from her without her consent by Johns Hopkins University, which then became the basis of these so-called immortal cell lines, which modern medicine has used to full advantage and has developed amazing things from it. But fundamentally, it originated from an injustice. And what might be certain people's hesitation to sign up for a registry that is taking cells from your body, even if it isn't directly connected to the true history of what happened to Henrietta Lacks. But you can't help but make a connection between medicine and medical and research institutions stealing people's cells for their own interests and benefit without consent, and the rightful mistrust, or I'll say it this way, the rightfulness of people to not immediately trust a system that is asking people to donate their cells. But you can see then what happens downstream in an inadequate, an inadequate supply of cells that could then be used to help people achieve health or cure disease with transplants like stem cell transplants and whatnot. So, the history of medicine's own abuse of its power and its access to people's bodies lives with us even in ways that don't appear on the surface.
Beautifully worded, and I think that's likely such a huge driver, and I think that very much validated distrust and the hundreds and hundreds of years of having no bodily autonomy for many of these groups, and for feeling like they're subject to experimentation, like we've spoken about many a time. I can imagine that the lack of feeling of safety to go through something like this would be a huge sociological barrier, right? If we're looking into not just the science, but also of course, there is this emotional element here that it will always be at play. I think it's important for us to recognize. And we can see, so I've placed 2 articles so far in the chat, but looking into some, it's important for us to think about with each of the diagnoses, that we're learning. And so I really encourage us, like, as you're studying, whether you're studying for the MCAT, Godspeed, or your steps or whatever it might be, to always take what you're learning, contextualize it to the community and to a real person, and think through, how do we approach quote unquote diagnosis disease? How have we in the past? How has this potentially been stereotyped, or and what discriminatory practices or racial undertones are here? Because by and large, they're present somewhere. And it only makes us more equipped and responsive physicians to be able to see that. So great discussion. Other thoughts? Oh, yes. Armand has a sentiment for you, Jeff. So Dr. K, that reminds me of something yesterday evening during the DAG presentation, when there are researchers treating humans as just part of a cohort and a data point. HeLa cells are an incredible opportunity for research, but at what cost? What about her? What about patient autonomy or her family? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh my God, Armin, that's such a great connection, because it's such a great thing to connect the dots around, because so much of the way that medicine and public health approaches human suffering as something to be studied, in and of itself, while it may be necessary, because we need to have as many tools of qualitative and quantitative analysis of harms caused by policy, harms caused by systems, harms caused by institutions. But too often, I'll say, too often the research is done without regard for the fact that these are human beings whose lives are being ruined, harmed, destroyed, or lives being snuffed out, killed. And it's really incumbent upon us in the professions of medicine and public health to always remember that these numbers aren't just numbers, they are real people. And whether they are real people who lived in the past or live in the present, they are not objects to simply observe, which is so the Western tradition. That is the Western approach to research and data. It is to treat human lives as if they are just things, just objects. And so, when we do research, or when we apply in our clinical practices technologies or medicines or advanced practices that have come through processes where there was injustice, either at the beginning or in the middle or anywhere in that process, we have to contend with the immorality or the unethical aspects that are baked into these modern advances. And I don't know what to do with that. Frankly, it is a hard thing to deal with, because there's real good that comes from the advancement. But to your question, Armin, to the point that you're asking, at what cost? It reminds me of a certain scripture from my youth of, to the effect of, if a person gains the world but loses their soul, what good is that? To gain the world but lose your soul. And I think we in medicine and in public health and in biomedical research really need to wrestle with that, because so much of what we rest modern practices on came out of deep injustice and harm and death.
Absolutely, Jeff. Oh, one sends a heart, and as do I. Um, Absolutely, it's something that we have to contend with, and it's our moral responsibility, right, to be able to respond to that, to do the reading, to do the research. Um, oh, Jeff, it's making me wish we could go through the slides with the other case discussions. Some other,
That'll be for another, that's another day, another event, but that is absolutely, it's, yeah, it's really important.
it's very important. It's very important. And the no matter where we go, like in life, our curiosity, I believe, and I can speak maybe for Jeff and I, maybe not, but is one of our best friends, right? Your ability to ask questions, to not take things for face value, and to think about what it might be that could be getting in the way of a patient receiving the care that they so deserve. Oftentimes I feel like we're trained a lot of times to just look at the patient for just the patient and, oh, okay, well, they didn't do XYZ, or to view like a lack of adherence to a treatment plan. And we always need to ask ourselves the deeper questions. What is preventing this person from accessing the care, following through with the care that they so deserve? And there's usually much more on the table for us to look at than what's standing right in front of us. So thank you all. Out of all the articles, maybe check out, I mean, you can look at them all, but this last one seems to also show us a general view of racism in hematology. I haven't read it all quite yet, but take a look. It'll help us to kind of understand what we learned today. Are there other reflections, questions, thoughts? No, not unrelated. So Armand shares slightly maybe unrelated, but speaking of Western medicine, we seem to emphasize intervention and progress, but Eastern traditions emphasize balance and harmony. Whew. With AI accelerating that pursuit of progress, do we risk further widespread adoption of dehumanizing care? Armand, get on the stage, my friend. Can I pass the mic? Jeff, we have reflections.
Sorry, I didn't know if I could unmute.
Yeah, of course. Go on.
No, I was just curious to hear Dr. K and Danya, you guys speaking more on your thoughts on that. Just Dr. K bringing up Western medicine, and growing up in an East or Southeast Asian household myself, I see kind of some differences there. And just we preach, and me as an applicant right now, as I'm looking into holistic programs and looking at osteopathic programs that emphasize those whole body values. There's a specific program at Creighton, for example, that has Jesuit values that emphasize cura personalis, which is an emphasis on total body and human care. But it seems like at the end of the day, there's a lot of just more of a focus on trying to maybe keep the ball rolling, keep the standards of progress by any means necessary, and viewing patients in a 10-minute scope of get in, diagnose, medicate, get out. And I think maybe I just, there's just things that I just don't know yet, right? Because I'm not in school yet, and I haven't been trained. But I was just curious on both of your guys' perspectives on that.
Jeff, I'm going to allow you to begin.
Whew, and there's only 12 minutes left.
Sorry.
No, you're at Armin. Are you where are you in your educational journey? Are you a medical student, pre-medical student?
I just finished post-bac. I've got MCAT on the 2nd of May, and then hopefully applications go well after that. So I'll be starting in, hopefully, fingers, toes, everything crossed, June of 27.
Awesome. First of all, congrats. That's you're making your way through. You have asked probably one of the most critically important questions that the profession of medicine really, really does not want, the Western profession of medicine really does not want to address, and would rather simply passively allow itself to be carried along by the techno-fascist impulses of AI. I will speak. I have nothing good to say about AI. And I do not see a moral or ethical justification for current AI. The technology that is being rolled out is owned and is developed and owned by fascist corporations. That is not a condemnation of AI per se. It is a condemnation of the context within which AI in its current form is being developed and forced on people, on individuals, on systems, on society. I do not believe, from a biological, as somebody trained in the biological sciences, that there is any justification for AI in its current form. It extracts, it destroys, and it dehumanizes. And it takes away from the human experience of thinking, of writing, of engaging directly with other people's minds. And AI is not what it claims to be. It's not intelligence. It's actually stealing the history of human thought. It isn't actually generative, and it is all just algorithmic. So it's probabilistic. It simply inserts the next word that probabilistically is the most likely one to go into that space. So I don't see any benefit from AI in its current form. I see only downsides to it. And as people trained in the biological sciences, we ought to be able to have the capacity to evaluate AI from a resource standpoint. And by resource, I mean water, clean water, clean air, environmental, and through a lens of that appreciates the extent to which all of this is happening in a context of environmental racism. So I do not think that the touted benefits of AI in its current form justify the resources that are being put towards it. And I do believe, as you are pointing out, Arman, that the technology will be used to not to alleviate the workload of humans, but will actually simply accelerate or intensify the expectation of productivity on humans to use AI, while not actually providing any of the relief of effort to humans who are actually doing work. So I don't know if you were expecting a balanced answer, but I'm not going to give you one.
Yeah, for that I asked, tell us how you really feel. No, it's beautiful. And this line that I place in the chat, Armand, is actually how I feel this way a lot of times, the stealing thought. And I'm someone who I go to AI for certain, like, helping me to construct, like, if I'm like, hey, here are these thoughts, can I shape this better? But what I've realized is that I risk each time that I'm even utilizing it. I notice the desire and the tendency to go towards, like, well, I could, it could just do this for me. And so I constantly I have to pause, and I find myself, we all find ourselves in those moments, right? Because we can use it as a tool at times. It can be, so I believe it can be supportive for certain things that we might need. But the risk there is also brings me to the at what cost. Because anytime we learn to rely on a tool, even for something as small as, can you restructure this question to make it more clear? The more that we rely on it or get more used to it, the more that we risk automating our humanity. And I think that's something that we've, I mean, likely all in some ways encountered or struggled with, and I do too, you know. And so, that being said, I think your orientation is really beautiful, and as you seek a medicine, and I'm so glad that you've had the life arc that you've had as I've been learning more about you, because you're taking such initiative to choose a type of medicine that aligns with who you are. And that's not something that many of us think to do, you know, until much later when we're like, oh my God. And so I think it's very important to keep this mindfulness in all that we seek to do, and to retain our ability to think for ourselves, and to you know, when we want reflective moments with others, like oftentimes a lot of my best yields will come from sitting with Jeff in a one-on-one, you know, and like thinking through processes or structures. So we also rely less on our community and our shared, you know, co-thinkers, when we overly rely on that. And I think we'll lose a lot. And the last thing I'll say is, as we try to move against the riptides of acceleration, we can have, you know, empathy for the system in some ways, how physicians are a lot of times subject to a practice of care that they don't oftentimes want to. Not all of them, of course, but they might not feel aligned with. But if we can do our best right now to practice a way of care that deprioritizes urgency and prioritizes humanity, both within ourselves and others, we can try to flex that muscle, as we've been saying this week, as much as we can, so that as we enter into the time in which we'll be responsible for care, our immediate visceral reaction is not fight or flight, which it partially will be, because that'll be scary to have someone's life in our hands. But still, we can build ourselves, right, emotionally and, you know, physically, spiritually, to a place where our gut reactions center that humanity first, and that slowness, even if the system fights against it. There are still ways for us to prioritize that, even against all odds. It says a lot in our body language, right? You can spend 10 minutes with someone and be very present, and it can feel just like it was 3 hours with someone who's not present. So how can we balance the pressures and still show up with ourselves and be regulated, is another question that I'm often asking myself, as someone who's always in a rush. So, and trying not to be. Okay, Jeff, we got to start that podcast, honey, because look at us. We're just going to go.
I mean, these are good questions. Thanks for asking that, Armand.
Armand, you're our first guest. Friend, you would be right there with us. Thank you so much for the questions. Keep asking them. Any other reflections? Things on our hearts? Well, stay tuned for Jeff and I's podcast coming at you soon. In the meantime, thank you so much, friends, for a wonderful discussion. It's been lovely. So I'm glad we had the time to do this. I hope to see you this evening at 5 p.m. and then at 6 p.m. So we have the committee for interns and residents at 5, and then the committee to protect healthcare at 6. And I am so excited. These are mobilizers to their very core. We're going to learn about unionization. We're going to learn how to fight the good fight. And we're also going to learn in our 6 p.m. session a lot of really key communication strategies for advocacy from their advocacy director at Committee to Protect Healthcare. And then, as always, our community building. So until then, my friends, we'll see you soon. And I'll